Typically, I don't think of commencement speeches as fodder for a Sunday rap on how to keep ourselves from experiencing so much self-imposed misery. But Anna Quinlan's a genius, and she graduated, she was attending, invited to give the commencement speech for a Mount Holyoke College commencement in May of 1999. And I read it, and every word of it just struck me, and I wanted to bring it to you, to give you a chance to be graced by its impeccable truth. She begins by the typical thing. I look at all of you today, and I cannot help but see myself 25 years ago at my own Bernard commencement event. I sometimes seem in my mind to have as much in common with that girl, the one that was standing there on the podium, as I do with any stranger I might pass in the doorway of a Starbucks or in the aisle of an airplane. I cannot remember what she wore or how she felt that day, but I can tell you this about her without question. She was perfect. No mistakes. Let me be very clear what I mean by that. I mean that I got up every day and tried to be perfect in every possible way. Anybody here kind of get a little familiar resonance with that commitment? If there was a test to be taken, I had studied for it. If there was a paper to be written, it was done. I smiled at everyone in the dorm hallways because it was important to be written, to be friendly. And I made fun of them because their backs, behind their backs, because it was important to be witty. And I worked as a resident counselor and sat on housing council. And if anyone had ever stopped and asked me why I did these things, well, I'm not sure what I would have said, but I can tell you today that I did them to be perfect in every possible way. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Kind of a drive to do that, to be perfect in every possible way. Being perfect was hard work. And the hell of it was, the rules of it changed. So that while I arrived at college in 1970 with a trunk full of perfect pleated kilts and perfect monogram sweaters, by Christmas vacation I had another perfect uniform. Overalls, turtlenecks, Doc Martens, and the perfect New York City Bernard College official hyper-intellectual part NU. Wow, that was very hard work indeed. I had read another Sartre or Sappho, and the closest I ever came to being bored and above it all is falling asleep. And finally, it was harder to become perfect because I realized at Bernard that I was not the smartest girl in the world. And eventually, being perfect day after day, year after year, became like always carrying a backpack filled with bricks on my back. And how I secretly longed to lay my burden down. Anybody been there? Good. So what I wanted to say to you today is this. If this sounds in any way familiar to you, if you've been trying to be perfect in one way or another too, then make today, when for a moment there are no more grades to be gotten, classmates to be met, terrain to be scouted, positioning to be arranged, make today the day to put down the backpack. Trying to be perfect may be sort of inevitable for people like us who are smart and ambitious and interested in the world and in its good opinion. But at one level, it's too hard, and at another, and whenever you happen to be, wherever you happen to be, and to assume the mask necessary to be the best of whatever the zeitgeist dictates or requires. Those requirements shape-shift, sure, but when you're close, you can read them and do the imitation required. But nothing Nothing important or meaningful or beautiful or interesting or great ever came out of imitations. The thing that is really hard and really amazing is giving up on being perfect and beginning the work of becoming yourself. How does that feel? Got a tough one for you. Really tough one for you today. You're going to dedicate the next 12 hours to being yourself. What in the hell is that? Wow. Being yourself. More difficult because there is no teleprompter to read, no template to follow, no masks to wear. Set aside what your friends expect, what your parents demand, what your acquaintances require. Set aside the messages this culture sends through its advertising, its entertainment, its disdain and disapproval about how you should behave. The lockstep is easier. But here's why you cannot march to it. Because nothing great or even good ever came out of it. When young writers write to me about following in the footsteps of those of us who string together nouns and verbs for a living, I tell them this: every story has already been told. Once you've read Anna Karenina and Bleak House and The Sound and the Fury and To Kill a Mockingbird and A Wrinkle in Time, you understand that there is really no reason to ever write another novel. Boy, can I relate to that. I get invitations from time to time to write a book. You should write a book. When anybody tells me that, I go in my office and I look around at my shelves. There's about 900 books. I said, I hadn't read all of them even. I'll write another one when they're all gone. Spare you. Spare you. No reason to write another novel except that every writer brings to the table, if she will let herself, something that no one else in the history of time has ever had. And that is herself, her own personality, her own voice. If she is doing Faulkner imitation, she can stay home. If she is giving readers what she thinks they want instead of what she is, she should stop typing. But if her books reflect her character, who she really is, then she is giving them a new and wonderful gift, giving it to herself too. And that is true of music and art and teaching and medicine. Someone sent me a t-shirt not long ago that read, "Well-behaved women don't make history." They don't make good lawyers either, or lap dancers, or doctors, or teachers, or butchers, or bakers, or candlestick makers. Imitations are redundant. Yourself is what the universe is crying for. Yourself is what the universe is crying for. Can you hear it? Can you hear it? Remember what Emerson observed? Your eye is placed where at any point in time it might testify to the ray of light that falls upon it. Ain't nobody else around to testify. It's you, baby. And if you're not you, then who? Then the world will miss something else. What does your eye see? You already know this. I just need to remind you. Think back first or second grade when you could still hear the sound of your own voice in your head, when you were too young, too uninformed, too fantastic to understand that you were supposed to take on the protective coloration of the expectations of those around you. Big mud puddles and sunny dandelions. Yeah, I remember the Jimmy story about being that. John Deere tractors and squirrels and catfish and trot lines. Jimmy was my stepson. About 30, 40 years ago, I was at Unity Village beginning a process of education to become a minister. You'd go there for 3 years, and you would line up, and they walk across the stage, and they go, "That's your ordination stamp." But Jimmy was a special kid. He had the not too bright intellectual stamp. And his teacher wrote a note on his report card one day and asked Betty and I to come in and speak with her. And she had some things she wanted to share with us about Jimmy. I said, sure, let's do it. So we showed up, and she said, look, basically her message was, I just want to let you know I really adore Jimmy. He's a sweet kid. God, he's got a wonderful personality. Everybody in the class loves him. But as far as intellectual stuff goes, Jimmy's, don't project too much in the way of expectation intellectually onto him, because he's just not that right. So college and things like that, I doubt seriously if that's in his future. Oh, he's not that bright. Tell me, do you know how long it takes a 17-disc John Deere to cultivate a 400-acre field? And she said, what? I said, well, Jimmy can tell you. Just ask him. And do you know how to make a trot line so you can catch about 40 catfish a day? Do you even know what a trot line is? Well, no, not exactly. So that brings up, who was the guy that had the, remember the philosopher that had the little rope? Will Rogers, I think his name was, who made that incredible observation. We're all ignorant, just on different topics. And she proved it for me that day, and I reminded her of that, and she said, thank you. As a great teacher. She said, thank you for bringing that to my attention. You already know this, folks. I don't need to remind you. Think back to first or second grade when you could still hear the sound of your own voice. Think of what the writer Catherine Drinker Bowen once wrote more than half a century ago. Many a man who has known himself at 10 forgets himself utterly between 10 and 30. Many a woman, too. You are not alone in this. We parents have forgotten our way sometimes. I say this as a deeply committed, often flawed mother of 3. When you were first born, each of you, our great glory was in thinking you absolutely distinct from every baby that has ever been born. You were a miracle of singularity. And we knew it in every fiber of our being, but you were only human, and being a parent is a very difficult job, more difficult than any other, because it requires the shaping of other people, which is an act of extraordinary hubris. Well, don't miss that. And over the years, we learned to want you, to want you things, to want you words that you say to have for yourself special meaning. We learn to want the lead in the play for you, to want academic brilliance for you, to want acceptance into our college of choice, fashion that fits our tastes, holes in your body limited to earlobes, please. One square inch of your body art, and that quite tastefully located, please. Oh, dear Lord, please. And how we want for you to travel the straight and narrow path, even though it's full of dead ends and potholes. Sometimes we wanted those things because we were convinced it would make life better, or at least easier for you. Sometimes we had a hard time distinguishing between where you ended and where we began. So that another reason that you must give up being perfect and take hold of being yourself is because sometime in the distant future, you may want to be parents too. And if you can bring to your children the self that you truly are, as opposed to some amalgam of manners and mannerisms, expectations and fears that you have acquired as a carapace along the way, you will give them too a great gift. And you will teach them by example not to be terrorized by the myopic vision of a worldview dedicated to relentless conformity and foolish consistency. Remember the hobgoblin of little minds. But it's hard to march to the beat of a different drummer, isn't it? And what is the nature of your worldview today? Does it stultify and repress, or does it liberate and inspire? Let's check it out. What do you think? Remember yourself from the day when you were younger and rougher and wilder, more scrawled and straight line. Remember all of yourself, the flaws and faults as well as the many strengths. Carl Jung once said, if people can be educated to see and embrace the unpolished side of their own natures, it may be hoped that they will also learn to understand and to love their fellow man better. A little less hypocrisy and a little more tolerance toward oneself can only have good results in respect for your neighbors. For we all are too prone to project onto those around us the unenlightened demands and expectations we weigh our own lives down with. Can you say amen to that? Most commencement speeches suggest you take up something or other, the challenge of the future, a vision of the 21st century. Instead, I'd like you to give up. Give up the backpacks. Give up the nonsensical and punishing quest for perfection that dogs too many of us through too much of our lives. It is a quest that causes us to doubt and denigrate ourselves, our true selves, our quirks and foibles and great leaps into the unknown. And that is bad enough. But this is worse. This is worse. That someday, sometime, you will somewhere, maybe on a day like today, a berm overlooking a pond in Vermont, the lip of the Grand Canyon at sunset, and maybe something bad will have happened. You will have lost someone you loved, or failed at something you wanted to succeed at very much. And sitting there, you will fall into the center of yourself. You will look for that core to sustain you. And if you have been perfect all your life and have dedicated your life to meeting all the expectations of your family, your friends, your community, your society, chances are excellent that there will be a great emptiness where a solid core of independent spirit ought to be. Don't take that chance. Begin to say no to the Greek chorus that thinks it knows the parameters of a happy life, when all it knows is the homogenization of human experience. Listen to that small voice from inside you that tells you to go another way. George Eliot, it is never too late to be what you might have been. It is never too early either. And it will make all the difference in the world. Take it from someone who has left the backpack full of bricks far behind, and every day feels it light as a feather. Enjoy your lightness. I do. God bless you.